The new Next.js has some interesting features, especially for agents. Vercel admits they have a Next.js deployment problem. And Microsoft releases the last JS version of TypeScript. Let's get right into it. Hey, it's Brennan Fire. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host this week, Jack Harrington, and with me are my esteemed colleagues, the lovely TJ Van Tol.
Hey, everybody.
And the amazing Paige Niederinghouse.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey. All right. Well, there's so much news this week. Let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Paige, are we seeing the last of JS? What's going on here?
We're seeing the last JavaScript-based TypeScript, according to Microsoft. Yeah, so TypeScript v6 is out now. And yeah, it's going to be the last version where the TypeScript compiler and program is actually written in JavaScript. They are now switching to Go. And they actually said in this blog post that they're almost done with Go. So if you're interested in upgrading to v7 and kind of giving it a preview, you can. But yeah, I mean, mostly it seems like this version of TypeScript is just kind of the stopgap between v5 and v7. So there's a lot of default changes that have happened. Strict mode has become true. Module is set to ES next. Root dir is always going to default to just a dot or a period. So they're just kind of, it seems like, lining it up for a really smooth transition into v7.
That's smart. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. Like, it's nice to kind of get those warnings or get those deprecation errors before you actually try the upgrade and it just fails or your app blows up when you do.
Right. And you'd assess that failure to Go as opposed to assessing it to just some defaults have changed. And it's like having both of those things simultaneously is like, uh-oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
really smart. Good on you.
Defaults
Good on you,
have changed.
Microsoft.
Deprecations galore. So like ES5 targets are gone. AMD, UMD, and System 6 modules for native module support have been removed because pretty much all browsers support them at this point. Base URL has gone away. So mostly you'll just get...
goodness. I hated that one. Oh my, what is that? Ugh.
Yeah. So now when you upgrade to TypeScript v6, you'll see deprecation warnings, and the team strongly encourages you to fix those before going on to v7. But you can, if you want to, if you just want to YOLO it, you can also go to v7. So...
Well, let's get serious. It's really Claude YOLOing it and then like doing some hijinks and then saying like, it's all good.
Right.
And then
you point Claude towards your errors and wait for it to finish fixing them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I need to do this upgrade real quick. I'm excited though to try 7, really. Like I'm just curious to see how well it works, especially for, I don't know how much it'll affect build times, but just little things like we use TypeScript so much. I mean, it's basically the default for all of us and probably everybody listening to this podcast. And so if your editor is just X% faster because the underlying code is X% faster, that's only a good thing, right? Seeing errors faster. That's the one thing I do notice where TypeScript does feel a little bit slow to me is when I do some change that's going to be refactoring and then watching before VS Code figures out the problems because of the TypeScript compiler running in the background. So I'm hoping in these sort of large projects where you have TypeScript all over the place, just this faster compiler will just make day-to-day stuff faster, which is only a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's like sometimes you make a change and you're like, I know this should fix this issue. And it's like, oh, hold on. I got to restart my TypeScript, and then, okay. Now, and then everything goes away for a bit. And then things come back without the red squiggle there. And you're like, yes. All right.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that jankiness is due to VS Code, due to the editor, the compiler, how it's trying to figure that stuff out. But I imagine having a faster underlying engine can only make that better. So I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's the language server that's underneath the hood. But I'm sure that rests on the compiler, my guess is, hopefully.
Totally.
All right. Well, cool. Awesome. So we have some Next.js news, huh?
Yeah, I feel like the rest of our show is now over to
Yeah.
Vercel and Next.js. But
Pretty much.
the first thing what I wanted to cover is there's a new Next.js version 16.2. There's a bunch of stuff in here. I thought the most interesting stuff to talk about is they made a bunch of AI improvements, because I think this stuff is interesting even if you're not a day-to-day Next.js user. So they've said that create next app, which is the default way to start a new Next.js project, creates an agents.md file by default, which gives AI coding agents access to version-matched Next.js documentation from the start of your project. But what they specifically do is, at least the typical way I've seen these agents files is they spell out like, this is Next.js, this is what it is, here's where you find documentation. So instead, what they're doing is they're bundling the documentation in to Next. So it's basically being published with the NPM package. And really all the agents MD file is doing is just pointing at that bundled documentation. So
Okay.
they've said
That's
that
clever.
they have a full blog post where they've done a bunch of research into this that says their research found that giving agents access to bundled documentation achieved a 100% pass rate on whatever it is they're testing. And they said, but it significantly outperformed skill-based approaches where you'd say register some agent skill where you told it how to learn. Basically, they say that their key insight is that always available context works better than on-demand retrieval because agents often fail to recognize when they should search for documentation. So really, when you start a new Next.js project, all that's going to be in your agent's MD file is a short directive that just tells agents where the docs are. It basically
Go
says,
to node modules.
this is Next.js, look in node
Next.js,
modules,
yeah.
next, dist, docs before writing any code.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
kind of an interesting
fascinating.
approach. Yeah. And I wonder if more, I think the reason to bring it up here, even if, because like I said, even if you're not a Next person, this might be an approach that we start doing more often, because I feel like I've not seen this before in frameworks or projects that I've used.
I've seen a lot of little small hacks here and there. Like there was Vibe Rules for a little bit that had this, and they would bring in files. I think we're still exploring in this space, and having them do research and like actually like try different things and then come up with the metrics on it. I think that's super valuable to the community, irregardless of what they do. For themselves.
With the framework itself.
And I got to tell you, it's really interesting because I've been working on the Netlify app builder stuff. And I changed it from skills over to agents.md and then got some feedback that like, no, we really want skills. So I pulled it back into skills again. And I don't know. I'll have to throw it around to the team and say like, hey, look at this research. This is interesting because like, I think people assume that like skills don't take any context, but they really do because then you got to read them in, and it's it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of kind of overhauling or creating some Claude code and agent files for one of the repos that I work on at work. And it's interesting because I found, and I don't even remember who this was, but I found some guy on Twitter who, I know, it just starts out like that, but it
Oh
was,
yeah, no, it's all good.
he'd actually written a fairly decent blog post and Twitter thread about like how he was using how he was using Claude. And it was like agents file, which is for all agents, not just Claude. It's for cursors and Zeds and copilots and whoever. Then Claude specific documentation, which is more about like the specifics of your application. And then things like skills for things that you would do normally, like PR reviews or running linters or testing, specific testing patterns, things like that.
Yeah.
And also like some other stuff. And I don't remember exactly all of it because it was at the end, it was like 9 files that I had changed that were almost all Claude related. But at the same time, it seems logical, and it seems like this is kind of the latest thing, is like different pieces for different things. Like if you already have a bunch of automated CI stuff in your application or in your repo, you don't necessarily need to call that out because the CIs will catch it. They'll do the linting, they'll do the test running, they'll do the formatting. if there's stuff that's specific to your application, though, like you don't use any, or there's specific ways that you like to do imports in your files or things like that, that's the kind of stuff that it wants you to call out so that Claude knows and can do that every time. But also it's very much about like keep it as minimal as possible, like 150 lines or 200 lines or less, so that Claude's context is saved for actually working versus try to understand all these different rules that you've given it and things that it doesn't necessarily need to know because you already have programmatic ways to kind of keep it in line. So I'll try and find that link because it did seem very sensible, and yeah, it might turn out to be really good. I need to get it like merged in and get the rest of the team to approve it and try it, but seemed like a good idea.
It's funny because the non-deterministic nature of all of this leads to this situation where we're all just like, we heard this tip or these people tried this and it worked for them, and we're just going back and forth trying to figure out what works, because there really is no quantitative measure to determine what's best, and it really might be different depending on what you're working on, what sort of team you have, etc. also.
Exactly. And then there's I'm doing this for my own application and I only use Claude, so I can do Claude specific stuff versus I'm Vercel and I'm writing,
I'm building it for everybody.
Gemini or Codex or Claude. So now I've got to be, it's funny because I was just thinking about it for a second. It's like, we've been doing this podcast for a couple years and we've gone through this transition together. It's like, there was all this, I don't know, tab complete.
They're garbage.
Right? And then like, would I ever let a thing code my stuff? And now it's like, I do almost zero coding it, and it's about how I do Claude config and stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny how it's shifted.
Yeah.
And last week, I think, was the first time that I actually gave Claude a task or a Notion ticket and then just let it do its thing. Like, run without me approving everything. I let it cook. And the first pass needed 2 or 3, like me editing it and kind of pointing things out. But besides that, like not having to keep stopping and approving Claude to do the next thing of like grep something or write this file or make those changes. Yeah, not as bad as I expected.
Got that level of trust going. Yeah.
Getting there.
That's good stuff. Well, I've been experimenting recently with just like pointing it at GitHub issues and being like, okay, create a working tree for this. Go figure it out. Is it a real problem? Da 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 da. And then like it's actually really good, really good.
All right, there's a couple of the next things in here I want to mention. So the one other interesting thing they're doing is they now write the dev server's PID port and URL into a .lock file. So basically, and I don't know if you've seen this too, but agents all the time, for me, spin up a dev server when one's running constantly. Mm-hmm. And this is basically just, they're writing it to a lock file to show that one's running so that the agents are aware of it and they don't try like to create infinite ports of this thing running over and over again. So
that's smart.
Small thing, but like really cool idea. And hopefully it actually works. So I haven't tried it out quite yet. And then the last AI thing I wanted to mention is they have this new experimental agent dev tools. And basically it says that the at Vercel/Next.js browser lets agents inspect a running Next.js application. But the way they do it is interesting. So it's an experimental CLI that just exposes browser level data. So this is different than, say, like the Playwright MCP, because essentially what they're doing is giving the agent a CLI that can access browser data. So things like network requests or console logs or the browser tree. So the theory, at least, is that if an agent wants to know something about what's happening in the browser, they would fire up this Next CLI that can then query things in the browser. Like, let me look at the network stack that happens when this occurs. Let me look at the element tree to see what I can debug there. So this is experimental. It's brand new, but it's just another interesting thing that they're kind of doing to basically give LLMs more tools. Again, I think this falls into our broader conversation of skills versus MCPs versus all this stuff and us all figuring it out. But
debate brewing between CLI and MCP at this point.
Yes, and so Vercel is now jumping on the CLI as a LLM tool bandwagon with this as well. So it's interesting. I've got a link to this in the show notes if you want to check it out. There's, of course, if you are a Next person, of course, there's changes to Next itself. So they've made Next Dev faster as always. They've made server components faster. They've improved that quite a bit. There's hydration updates. So there's some other stuff in there that you should read if you are a Next.js person, if that's the sort of thing you do or work on. But the AI stuff was interesting just to talk about, that anybody might get some inspiration for the types of stuff that they work on.
I think it's awesome. And I love that they contributed back the React change so that now anybody that uses RSCs, they're going to get, faster app. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it was like a low-level change. Basically, they found a chance where V8 was very slow. Just JavaScript engines were very slow at deserializing, so they just put in a check. And just a small little thing, but it's supposedly made serialization up to 350% faster. So it's a win for everybody.
That.
Yeah, gotta love that. All right. Well, in more Next news, so Next.js has finally admitted that they've had a deployment problem all these years, and that Vercel has been the premier place to deploy Next.js because it's just a pain in the butt otherwise. And what they've done is they've gone and now built out an adapter layer that will get you deploying between like, of course, Vercel, but also Netlify, Cloudflare, a bunch of different providers. So in that way, it's similar to what, like, for example, Tanzac Start does. We have, an adapter to various, providers, and then Nitro if you want to just do your own thing. All is not like, roses and parades, though. If you look over at the Netlify blog post that goes along with this, it's a little more kind of reserved. My friend over there, Phil, on Netlify team, Phil, has been like doing this framework work with Next.js, and there's still a lot of complexity underneath all this. Like PPR, partial pre-rendering, is still very difficult and not really compatible with the CDNs we have nowadays. Cache revalidation is, again, really difficult the way that they've set it up. It's not any easier with this. It's just exposed. But, again, not really CDN compatible. And then on-demand revalidation also has some issues. So, yes, you can deploy it anywhere, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to deploy or easy to write one of these adapters. It just means that now the adapters are an open standard, and when they have changes that are going to be required, they'll update the adapter standard, and then the adapting folks will follow suit.
So is this almost like when Apple was forced to let other browsers be on its ecosystem in their devices instead of just Safari? They were like, okay, fine, we will make that possible, but it will still be an absolute pain for everybody involved.
I don't know I think it's just technically a pain because the way that they've done these features, like PPR and this sort of stuff, is just, it works really well within the Vercel architecture, but not really well within like sort of the standard architecture out there. I don't know what those decisions were or why those decisions were made the way that they were, but I think they had to kind of do this, though, because that was like one of the big sticking points that people had with Next.js was like, oh, I don't want to only be on Vercel. And to be able to come up with some bullet point, which is basically, we've done our able best to make it easier for folks to do non-Vercel things, even if it's still a huge lift, even though they've got these adapters. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is at the very least a more sensible answer to the vNext. So we've covered on the show that Cloudflare basically forked Next.js in a way and created this vNext alternative framework that runs on Cloudflare. And then we covered the Twitter drama that ensued from that happening. This is at least a more sane path forward, even if these adapters do require a little more work. At least it's a better answer than saying... do what Cloudflare did and vibe code a alternative
it's
to
a
this.
more official answer. Yeah.
Yes.
From the source.
It feels like a direct response to that, but with an indirect solve.
Yeah. Crazy days. Okay. Do we have any lightning news this week?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we got a bunch.
All right. Okay, TJ, what you got?
All right, I think I've got the smallest of the lightning news, and that's
Okay.
just that Firefox is joining the split tab craze. So in Firefox 149, which you can download now and use, it is out for everybody. You can create split tabs, and we covered previously on the show how Chrome added this. I think this was originally an Arc feature, right? Arc had this.
Yeah.
I don't know who originally came up with this idea, but apparently it's all the craze now. This is what all the kids are doing. So now in Firefox
It's good,
natively,
man.
you can
It is.
right click on a tab. You can create new split views in Firefox as well.
Yeah, it's real good. And they also have
Yeah.
maybe that's Chrome, but they had like these tab groups that were really nice now, at least in Chrome.
Yeah, I think probably more than Chrome has that. If you listen to our like fans and people in the Discord, they're all about Vivaldi. Apparently, all of our favorite listeners are Vivaldi supporters, but I've actually never used it and not really heard much about it besides, lately.
I had to go on a browser tour because we had just an issue that came up in work related to Chromium-based browsers. So I ended up doing a little bit of a browser tour. I updated my Opera. I tried out Brave. And I've now got so many browsers installed on my computer just because of the nature of what I do,
right? And
for work
like-
and also this podcast. I think I literally have a dozen browsers. I guess you can never have too many. But anyways,
I mean, if you just keep cycling through them, TJ, no browser will have a full picture of who you are as a user.
there you go. Yeah.
yeah, I'll just confuse all the agents. But
Google still will
Firefox,
because, it doesn't know all that stuff yet. All right. Paige, what you got?
Well, OpenAI, first of all, has shut down Sora, their AI video generating podcast or application. That just kind of came out of nowhere. I don't
You're right.
know if you guys were using it or had tried it. I personally had not, just because I don't care. But
I
had no need for such things.
yeah,
I had tried it for the novelty of
Yeah,
it, just
exactly.
because. So, I mean, it entertained me for all of 5 or 10 minutes to scroll
Right.
through it. It was somewhat entertaining, but I wasn't returning to it. I didn't see a reason to come back. Like it was very much just like a novel thing for a few minutes, and then
Yeah.
there was no reason. There was no real community there that I could tell.
yeah, and that's kind of, they didn't say this in the article, but that's kind of what I gather is that everybody tried it for a second, they enjoyed it for 30 seconds, then they got bored with it and went on to do other things. But yeah,
Can you
it just
imagine
a
if you're
very
the researcher that spent years building out this, video idea with, papers and academia and all that. And, you get hired in OpenAI and they're going to go release this. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, I tried it for a few minutes and who cares?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
So I don't think this totally came out of nowhere, though, because there have been stories of Sam Altman declaring code reds and to make more of a focus on ChatGPT as a core product, because they're getting a lot of competition from Gemini, from Claude. They've taken all this money to start making money. I don't think Sora was paying the bills in any way, and there was probably a non-significant amount of resources being spent on that. So I get the sense that they're trying to really focus on their core product. They've announced that they're going to be adding ads, but that still has yet to materialize. So I imagine some of those people are probably being put towards that. And this AI slop video app that no one, I don't think, was actually using is probably lower on the priority list. So that's probably why it got the axe.
Well, the only interesting wrinkle about this is that we talked about this on the show, is that recently, like a few months ago, Disney said that they were going to put $1 billion towards Sora and towards licensing characters that you could use to create videos within Sora. So
Forgot about that. Oh, yeah.
So I guess Disney's just out of luck now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Disney gets their $1 billion back or whatever, but
Yeah, well, they've got their
I hope.
Imagineers. They can put a few Imagineers on it, and come up
Right.
with their own thing.
it is funny though
Hire the guy
that so
from
much
OpenAI.
there's so much money in this world that like they're willing to just say like, oh, that's just $1 billion contract. We don't,
Hmm.
that's it's not that big of a deal. We got more important things to be working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has not been a good week for the Disney CEO who is new. Like this is his first or his second week in the seat. So this has fallen apart. And then apparently also there was a collaboration that they were doing with Fortnite where they were going to have Disney related content or you could create things with Disney characters or something with the online game Fortnite and the studio just laid off like a bunch of engineers. So
Oops.
that sounds like it's going to get deprioritized as well.
Oh man. Ouch. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
crazy.
Disney will be fine, though. Their theme parks are doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are enough Disney adults out there to keep them going for a long time.
Exactly. Oh, and then
Uh,
the other piece of news is Claude, because we always talk about AI stuff. Claude now can control your whole computer. So everything basically that OpenClaw was doing unsafely, Claude wants to do possibly more safely.
Possibly. More safely.
Possibly. Yeah, so it's kind of been the release of Claude Code and then recently Claude Cowork and now basically the two of those together on your computer can control it. So Claude can now ask permission to open files, it can use your browser, it can run dev tools. Like Claude just wants to be your assistant on everything technology related and it seems like they're really making strides towards that, to be honest.
Well, this leads nicely into our discussion that we wanted to follow up on from last week about Claude Cowork, because that
Hmm.
seems to be the umbrella thing they're using for these features that are for users that aren't us, honestly, for
Yes.
people that aren't just using Claude Code. And I did have some time to play with it this week and try it out a little bit. So
Hmm.
first of all, I guess I discovered some things last week. I was a little bit confused on what is Claude Cowork, what is Microsoft Cowork, because Microsoft just recently announced some big deal with Anthropic as well. So Claude Cowork is basically, it is kind of Claude Code with just a nicer interface, but it also has this ability to just kind of do things on your computer for you. So
Hmm.
like I had it, for example, build a slide deck for me because I had a wiki page that I actually legitimately needed to present at a company meeting, but I had a wiki page that explained it. So basically I told Claude Cowork, I was like, I just pasted in the contents of the wiki page, said I need a slide deck. And it thought for like 10 minutes. So I probably took down a good chunk of a rainforest having this thing look through the wiki page. But it actually built a PPTX file that had a legit slide presentation in it that was
Nice.
quite good. It
Hmm.
was halfway decent. So then the next thing I tried was that I gave it our template because we have a company template for building slides. And I was like, hey, you should use this template to build the slides because that's what I'm going to actually need to present it with. And it thought for even longer. And then eventually it aired out because it just said like, this thing's too big, essentially. Like it couldn't handle the file sizes or something about it. So
Hmm.
I see the promise of this for sure, because if this thing actually worked and did, like, it could legitimately solve a problem for me. But I think, and it's experimental, like it's got a tag on it that it's brand new. So
Hmm.
I think that much in the way that some of these files are just going to be harder for it to work with, because the one thing about code is that for the most part, you're just dealing with text files. So I feel like the context is a little bit easier to manage. But once Claude starts working with files, things like PDFs and PowerPoints and Word docs, it might have more problems with it. I don't know. Paige, I know you played with it too. What sort of
I
stuff were you
did.
experimenting with?
So I was talking to one of my friends after we had recorded the show on Friday night. We were having dinner, and she was telling me that in her job, she's in the revenue department of her company. She was using it to like look at her Google Calendar, pull
Hmm.
stats from meetings, and like compile these weekly reports or whatever reports that she sends on a regular basis. So that got me thinking at my company now. We have like a little daily stand up where we post our notes of what we've been working on, what we're planning to do today, blockers, things like that. We have a weekly report where we present to the company like what's the engineering department doing versus what's the marketing department and sales. Everybody has like their little section. And we also have like a weekly dev team meeting where we all kind of talk across the teams about what we're working on. So I was like, these are recurring meetings. All the documentation is pretty much in Notion because that's what we use as our central repository. So let me set up Claude Cowork to do a daily report and then weekly reports for these different meetings. I can point it towards the like our team stand-up page where it can see everybody's notes and tickets that they're working on. I can point it towards the all hands so it sees the template that we use and like what we fill in typically. And I can point it towards the other team stand-ups in engineering so that we can compile a higher level, what are the teams working on in general versus what are individuals working on. And I used the Notion connector because there's a thing that Cowork has called connectors. So you can go in and like search for, G Suite or Slack, Notion. There's a lot of them. And if there are not connectors that will connect you directly, there is Claude for Chrome or Claude in Chrome, I think it is, which is basically just you tell Claude where on the internet you want it to go, and it will just go to that URL and look at stuff. So if there's not a connector, you can just basically point it towards something that you want it to go check out. So I set up a bunch of these recurring tasks. One runs every morning at 9 a.m. during the week. One runs once a week on Fridays. One runs once a week on Mondays. They've got different like little instructions that they will go through step by step to get all the information and then compile it into a specified format. And it's been working great so far. I am very impressed. So
So do you have this scheduled? Like, is there a way to schedule things cron job style where
Mhm.
it just runs and that's all within Cowork also?
It is. There's a little tab over on the
Huh.
side of your Claude desktop that looks like a little clock, and that's where you can see any scheduled ones, and you just start like a new cowork conversation and say, I want this to run every X day or every week or whatever, and kind of like make sure that Claude has the information it needs. It will ask questions to clarify. It will, try and like understand as much about the task, and then it will show you what its
Oh,
little
this is
instructions say. And you can say, yes, this is good, or no, I need you to adjust this, or look here, or do something differently. But honestly, like for those just kind of like rote tasks that you have to do with a lot of disparate sources, it seems really, really helpful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see this now. I didn't see before scheduled, and
Hmm.
then you can say to run when your computer is awake. You can have it keep your computer awake, all within Cowork. This is kind of cool.
Yeah, if you have something that you need to run every night, like some sort of a batch job or a, report or whatever, yeah, you can set it to run any time of day or night. Mine typically run during the workday because they take like maybe 5 minutes typically just for the amount of stuff that I'm pulling. But I guess if you had a really long running one that needed a lot of time to chew through something, you could set it to run at 3 a.m. or something if you wanted to.
It's interesting. And then the other thing I figured out, because I looked into Microsoft's offering, because I was curious what the hell they actually announced, and they did a deal with Anthropic where essentially they're going to offer this, but in Microsoft's cloud ecosystem. So
Mhm.
basically,
Okay.
think a way of running Cowork in Microsoft's cloud in a way that knows about all your Microsoft stuff. So presumably,
Yeah.
it would have OneDrive and Outlook and your Outlook calendar and all of that stuff in the Office suite and whatever to work with. But it's the underlying engine would be the same thing that's driving Claude Cowork. So it's basically Microsoft just saying they want to build an enterprise version of this in their environment.
Hmm. And I will say that this is absolutely like Anthropic has hit the nail on the head in terms of appealing to the mass audience because I have PMs who don't necessarily use Claude Code very much. They understand it, they've maybe tried with it, but they don't think of like to reach for it as their main thing. But when I showed off Claude Cowork in our dev team meeting this week and how I'd set it up, like immediately one of them was like, I pointed it towards the change logs for our latest release that I have to send out notes to our customers about. And it went through and like looked at all the tickets, summarized them in ways that made sense, that were human readable, and it saved me just a ton of time. So this is my new favorite thing.
It's also, they have this ideas panel, and a lot of these ideas, it's genuinely kind of interesting, but because it really is things that I look at and go like, oh, I could use that, because there's one that's like organize and rename and classify my PDFs. There, I don't know, there's just some interesting ideas on here. Now that Claude can use my computer and has these connectors, like summarize a Slack channel with a Slack connector. I mean, it's just some interesting ideas.
Yeah. I understand, or I think I understand now, why Anthropic did not buy OpenClaw. They were probably very close to this being a thing, and we're just like, forget it. We're not even going to worry about that.
Yeah, this definitely feels like it's a nicer interface on top of what OpenClaw can do. Obviously not as powerful, because with OpenClaw you can do sorts of crazy stuff, but presented in a way that your PM can use.
Exactly.
And imagine if they owned like a JavaScript runtime that could go and build and deploy apps on the fly for you.
Imagine.
Like it could actually go and like build a little app that would actually you'd interact with, and it would hit a database, and crazy.
That would be crazy, wouldn't it?
It'd be crazy. Just totally crazy. Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a quick one. It's a upgrade on Ollama. So when either OpenAI or Anthropic decide to actually start charging us what it really costs to use all this stuff, we're suddenly going to get very excited about local models, which is where Ollama comes into play. And now VS Code, their GitHub integration, GitHub Copilot integration, now just natively supports Ollama models. So when Opus 4, Opus 5, or whatever the next thing is way too expensive for the average person, you can go grab like Quencoder or one of those and use a pretty decent model locally on your machine and have it inside of GitHub Copilot. So some good alternatives out there for you.
Yeah, Kimi also is another one that's becoming popular, or at least is popular among some users.
All right.
Still doesn't appeal to me. I'm not a local model person. Maybe at some point, maybe if it does become outrageously expensive, or I'm lucky enough my employer pays the bill for my AI work. So if that were to change too, I would probably get suddenly more interested as well.
Yeah, I'm with you, TJ. It's like, as long as somebody else is footing the bill for me, I will happily use whatever cloud-based solution we have.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. Ollama actually now supports their cloud version as well, so they've got some cloud models, and so but that to me is kind of interesting from the like economics perspective. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I see how Ollama is finally going to decide how to make money. They're going to have their cloud service. But,
I mean, I can see it, but at that point, I would just use Claude or OpenAI personally, right? Like.
All right. Well, that was great. Let's talk about what's making us happy.
Let's do it.
TJ, what's making you happy?
The Hierarchy book series is making me happy. So we've talked about The Will of the Many, which I've read before, and Paige, I know you read also. So the second book in that series, The Strength of the Few, came out like maybe a month or so ago. And well, first of all, I reread The Will of the Many because I was debating whether I wanted to do that or not, because it's not a short book. But I decided to do it, and I was glad that I did, because it was still really good on a second read through. And I'm right now about halfway through The Strength of the Few, and it is very good. It is very different in a way that's hard to talk about without giving spoilers away.
Yeah.
If you've read the Will of the Many, though, you kind of have an idea why, because that book still has the craziest ending of any book I've ever read. It's wild. But just to quickly explain the world, it's basically a fantasy world that's inspired by ancient Rome in a very weird way, but there are also basically magic powers. There's this concept of will and a pyramid. So everybody can give will to like higher status people, so that the higher status people kind of turn into gods because they're just inheriting all this will from people. And then there's political intrigue and all sorts of antics up from there. But it's just a really good book. If you like fantasy books at all, it's just a really good time and a really good story. And like I said, I'm halfway through book 2. Probably will have it done by next week, so I can report back on how that went.
Nice. Yeah, that was a
Awesome.
very fun read.
All right, Paige, what's making you happy?
I'm going to pick Claude Cowork this week as the thing that is
Yeah, no.
saving me a bunch of time and looking at disparate sources of information and doing it for me and giving me, like, it's not perfect. I know that, but I'm happy to look at what it is summarized and then just edit that and be done with it in way, way less time. Because I was doing it last week manually and I was like, this is so dumb. There has got to be a better way now with the amount of tools that we have and access that these tools have. Why am I trying to do this the old fashioned way? I could put an agent on this. So after having like spent an afternoon with Claude Cowork, refining these things and running them and testing them and looking at all the instructions, yeah, it's I think it's going to be a bigger game changer than I imagine right now.
I think the
Yeah,
one
you're getting
thing
that automation high that people get. It's like,
Yes.
ooh, yeah, no, actually, I got that covered. In fact, my automations have that covered.
Well,
that's a good thing.
that's actually exactly what I was going to say, Jack, because our world is radically different than it was a few years ago with AI tools. But that's one thing that I feel like has not changed. Like one core developer feature is that you just get so irritated with manual processes that you find you're like, I have to automate this. And
Yep.
now we have new tools, but that workflow is still there. That's still just getting irritated with. I can't believe I'm manually writing up these notes, or I can't, I have to find a way.
Yeah, exactly. All right. What's making me happy this week is grilling. I'm grilling again. Yay! Spring
Nice.
is finally sprung. And we are getting some cold days still, but it's great to just be able to get some actual grilling time in. And it's so tasty. Totally love it. Nothing like
What are you
you
making,
grilling
Jack?
just at the moment, just chicken. But it's kind of cool actually. We have this like uni, like cast iron little skillet thing that's supposed to go in their like pizza oven, and we put it veggies on it and that sort of stuff. But whatever, it's just a cast iron skillet, and so I throw that on the grill with veggies, and so good. Yeah, it's just really nice. Yeah, sorry that Michigan, I'm sure, is not exactly that same thing, but it's still good.
We're getting there. And also we have more tolerance we'll bust out the stuff earlier than I think a lot of people, because around here, like, you're just so craven for warmer weather that as soon as you get it, everybody's out in shorts. Everybody's like, well, it's close enough. We're doing
good.
this.
Exactly. I'm good.
Well, yeah.
Let's go.
Like, even in Atlanta, if it gets above 60 degrees, suddenly you see convertibles driving around. You see people in sandals. Like, everybody just can't stand it to be in long sleeves anymore.
No,
Oh
and
gosh.
this winter was so rough that like now it's in the 50s now here, and that's good enough. It just feels good. So I've not busted out the grill quite yet, but I don't feel like I'm quite the professional level of griller you are, Jack, because you've got all your tools. Well, you've talked about grilling stuff. You've got your pizza oven, you've got your fancy grill.
Actually, I backed off the fancy grill. I still like a Weber kettle grill, but actually AI. Claude and I were talking about that. And so actually I used to have this like hibachi setup where it was like a big steel plate with a hibachi thing in the middle.
Yeah, you've talked
And
about
then
it on this show
Yeah,
before.
I've also had
in the
like
past,
forced air. And Claude was like, why are you doing that? Kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know, it seemed cool and it like whatever, right? And he's like, yeah, but that forced air system was not meant to like heat up a massive piece of iron, of steel. Like it's calibrated for the usual Weber mesh grill thing. And and so I switched back to that, which is a whole lot easier to clean. And it's fantastic. Like the heat is super even, distributed. It's really good. Really, you're not getting a lot of flare ups. Yeah, it's so much easier. So sometimes, actually all the time, simple is better. Simple is always better. If anything, simple is always better.
Yeah.
So,
Code, life.
ChatGPT has been giving me some steak cooking tips. So I've not out on the grill, but just cooking on cast iron. And I've cooked steaks for many years, and I've never learned some of these things. So it taught me that you don't want to turn over your steaks when you're cooking it on cast iron. You really only want to do the one flip. You want to make sure you have a timed amount, because flipping it back and forth is just kind of burn it more than anything else. So you want to have a set time. You want to cook on some pretty high heat, and then you want to time out based off your steak and your thickness when you're going to turn it, and then do it. And then if you're going to add butter and stuff, you don't want it to cook in the entire time. You want to add it towards the end. And there's a specific way that you want to do that as well. And I'm just sitting there cooking, and I've got my ChatGPT running on my iPad next to me. It's just telling me what to do. And, 2026, man, it's crazy.
The year of AI agents helping us cook.
Yeah,
it's true. It works.
Yeah, I'm making better steaks. It works. That's the crazy thing. It's just good advice.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I use it a lot, but I don't tell my wife about it, because anytime I talk to my wife about AI stuff, she's like, kind of like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But, as an example, I'm making this art piece for my cousin who's had a big birthday coming up. So, I want to make him actually something special out of the shop. And, I went over to this I don't know, antique / hardware store. It's a Portland thing, and found these really cool brass fittings to go and add to it for hooks for jackets and dog leashes and stuff, because that's what it's about. But unfortunately, those have light fitting threads on them, and you can't get that at an average hardware store. You got to go for specific lighting. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? This is crazy. I got to get this thing done. So I talked to Claude about it, and he's like, oh, here's the thread thing. And I'm like, well, can I go and print that? He's like, oh, yeah, I guess you can. Sure. And we went through the whole thing, modeling it. And now I've got custom 3D printed nuts that's crazy. And I never would have thought to do anything like that had I not had, Claude behind me.
Yeah. I mean, I watch these home improvement shows on HGTV, and some of them have the husbands especially are woodworkers. So they have these CNC machines. I watched them print a custom front door and use the CNC machine to do these really intricate designs that the wife had designed on the computer. And she just put it into the CNC machine and was print these, these matching blocks on this door that make it look super, super old, custom carved, but it was all computer generated, the whole design of it. And it was so cool. I mean, it turned out fantastic. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you don't even know is available until you get into that world.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I tell you something stupid I did this week too with Claude yet again? So my kids' soccer season's starting up, right? It's March, it's spring. Soccer is back in the air here. And they're in a different league this year. And this league has the most unusable, horrible website ever. So I got sick of looking up the game times and the standings and whatnot on this website. So I just told Claude to just build it, just build it, but make it better. And it took a half hour, and I created a way better version of this website. I just tossed it out on Netlify, Jack, so you can get your commission for having it out on having it on Netlify. Claude figured out where it gets its data from. It built it. I didn't write a single line of code. I just put 30 minutes, and all of a sudden now I've got a better bookmark on my computer and my phone for checking the standings. And it's crazy, but it was so cool. I had fun. It was just, and
you should share it with the rest of the kids' parents on the team. If you have it.
I've thought about it. The only downside is I'm this is the classic web developer thing. I'm hesitant of now people wanting other things or coming to me for other requests for this type of stuff. But
that's true.
I can tell them Claude Cowork, build this yourself.
So what you need to have it use Claude Cowork, and then have it go in the day after all the games are played, or the day on the weekend or whatever, on the Monday after, give you a newspaper that is, all the
Oh,
standings,
yeah.
which teams are on the rise, which teams didn't do well,
Oh,
and it's
yes.
like all that stuff. I'm serious. Like people have been doing the newspaper
Email-
thing recently. Have make me a newspaper.
Email the coach a PowerPoint presentation on how to improve based off recent results.
Strategy.
Yeah, man. Jimmy should should swing from the other side. He's not a lefty.
Yeah.
He's a righty.
Feed in Claude a video of the game. See what suggestions it has. Training, make a
gosh.
training regiment. Yeah. This is where we're headed.
Yep.
Exactly. The Oakland A's kind of thing where like you're doing the numbers analysis on everybody and finding like the little hidden gems and things. Crazy.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, this has been a fun one, guys. Yeah. Join us next week for another exciting front end fire. We'll see what Vercel and all the rest of them are doing. I've been your host, Jack Harrington. Of course, you can join us over on our Discord server and jump into our front end fire channel and have a chat with us. And in the meantime, we'll see you next week.
Yeah. See everybody.
See you then.